The crystalline halls of the Galactic Defense Academy echoed with chittering laughter as Cadet Marcus Chen stumbled through the holographic obstacle course for the third time that morning. His Zephyrian classmates' translucent wings shimmered with amusement, while the towering Chronari cadet's forearms gestured mockingly at the lone human's clumsy performance. Perhaps the primitive should return to his mud ball, hissed Cadet Vexithara, her serpentine form coiling with disdain. Surely tending to Earth's gardens would suit him better than warfare. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, ignoring the jeers. The course was designed for beings with natural advantages, enhanced reflexes, multiple limbs, or telepathic coordination. Humans possessed none of these gifts, which made him the Academy's most unlikely student in its 3,000-year history. Commander Zaltuk, a veteran hegemony officer with battle scars across his chitinous exoskeleton, observed from the viewing platform. His compound eyes fixed on the human with barely concealed skepticism. When the Terran Council had insisted on sending a representative to the Academy, he'd expected at least a genetically enhanced specimen. Instead, they'd sent this unremarkable biped who couldn't even complete basic maneuvers. "Cadet Chen," Zaltuk's voice boomed through the training hall. "Report to combat theory immediately. Perhaps you'll find more success in academic pursuits." The other cadets' laughter intensified as Marcus nodded silently and trudged toward the lecture halls. Combat theory was considered the easiest course, a repository for cadets who couldn't handle practical training. Professor Kethmar, an ancient cerebral whose enlarged cranium pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, barely acknowledged Marcus's arrival. The human took a seat in the back, pulling out his primitive paper notebook while others interfaced directly with neural data streams. "Today we examine the Battle of Zarian Prime," Kethmar intoned, his mental projections filling the room with tactical displays. "A textbook victory utilizing the hegemony's standard 3-tier assault formation." Marcus studied the holographic battlefield, watching the elegant dance of starships and orbital platforms. The hegemony forces had overwhelmed the rebel stronghold through superior numbers and coordinated strikes, a classic display of overwhelming force that had defined galactic warfare for millennia. But something nagged at him. In the data streams, he noticed inefficiencies that others seemed to overlook. The battle had lasted 16 hours and cost thousands of lives. On Earth, similar sieges had been resolved with a fraction of the casualties through more creative approaches. "Professor," Marcus raised his hand, drawing annoyed glances from his classmates. What if they'd approached from below? The room fell silent. Kethmar's cranium flashed crimson, a sign of irritation. "Below, Cadet?" "There is no below in space." "But there is relative positioning," Marcus persisted, standing and moving to the holographic display. His fingers traced new vectors through the three-dimensional battlefield. The defenders concentrated their shields toward the primary assault vectors. But if you approached from the orbital plane of the system's asteroid belt using the debris as cover— "Impossible," snorted Cadet Morganthi, his forearms crossing dismissively. "The gravitational stresses would tear any fleet apart." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Not if you fragmented your forces. Smaller units could navigate the hazards while maintaining communication through quantum entanglement relays. The defenders would never see them coming until— "Enough!" Kethamar's telepathic projection slammed against Marcus's mind, though it barely affected the human's natural mental barriers. "Your primitive warrior instincts have no place in civilized warfare." But Marcus wasn't finished. Over the following weeks, he began documenting alternative approaches to every historical battle they studied. While his classmates memorized standard formations and time-tested strategies, he sketched impossible maneuvers in his notebook, flanking attacks through stellar phenomena, coordinated strikes using civilian infrastructure, psychological warfare that exploited species-specific fears. The Academy's instructors grew increasingly frustrated with his questions. Why waste resources on prolonged sieges when targeted strikes could cripple enemy morale? Why engage in costly frontal assaults when misdirection could achieve the same objectives? Why follow predictable patterns when chaos could be weaponized? Everything changed during the Academy's final war games. The graduating cadets were divided into 2 fleets and tasked with capturing a heavily fortified station. Marcus found himself assigned to the smaller rebel force under Cadet Vexithara's command, clearly meant to demonstrate the futility of challenging established order. "We're outnumbered 3-1. Vexithera hissed as they reviewed their available assets. The logical strategy is a fighting withdrawal to minimize casualties. Marcus studied their fleet composition, a handful of outdated frigates, some civilian cargo haulers, and a few mining vessels. By every conventional metric, they couldn't win. But conventional thinking was precisely the problem. What if we don't fight them at all? He suggested. The other cadets stared at him in confusion. This is a combat simulation, Vexithera said slowly, as if addressing a child. The objective is to capture the station. Exactly. Not destroy the enemy fleet, capture the station. Marcus's grin made his teammates nervous. Give me command of the mining ships. The battle began predictably enough. The Loyalist fleet under Cadet Morganthi approached the station in perfect formation, their superior numbers allowing them to overwhelm the defensive platforms. Vexithera's forces engaged in what appeared to be a desperate holding action, their few warships dancing around the station's perimeter in seemingly random patterns. But Marcus's mining ships had vanished. While the main fleets exchanged fire above, the converted miners approached from the system's primary star, their heat signatures masked by solar radiation. They moved in single file, using the station's own shadow to remain undetected until the final moment. When they emerged from the star's corona, they weren't attacking, they were broadcasting. Attention station personnel. Marcus's voice filled the communication channels. Your defensive fleet is about to be destroyed. In approximately 90 seconds, the Loyalist forces will breach your shields and begin bombardment. However, I'm offering you a third option. The mining ships had been retrofitted with powerful transmitters, and Marcus used them to flood every frequency with a simple message: surrender to his forces, and they'd be treated as prisoners of war with full rights under galactic conventions. Continue fighting and face the inevitable bombardment from their own allies. The psychology was perfect. The station's defenders saw themselves trapped between two hostile forces, and Marcus had given them a way to survive with honor intact. Within minutes, the station lowered its shields and signaled surrender, not to the approaching Loyalist fleet, but to the tiny mining force. The simulation ended in stunned silence. Commander Zaltuk's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what had occurred. In 3,000 years of Academy war games, no cadet had ever achieved victory through negotiation. The very concept was alien to species that had evolved through conquest and domination. This is, he paused, searching for words, unprecedented. Over the following days, Marcus found himself summoned to meetings with the Academy's senior staff. His notebook, filled with months of unconventional tactical theories, became the subject of intense scrutiny. Concepts that had been dismissed as primitive thinking were suddenly being analyzed by the hegemony's greatest military minds. The human had done something that seemed impossible. He'd found flaws in perfection. His graduation ceremony was unlike any in Academy history. Instead of the traditional commendation for excellence in standard warfare, Marcus received something far more significant: authorization to establish a new curriculum track focused on asymmetric tactical innovation. As he stood before his former classmates, many of whom now regarded him with a mixture of respect and bewilderment, Marcus reflected on humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their physical capabilities or technological superiority. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy's greatest military academy had spent millennia perfecting the art of war, but they'd forgotten that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to change the rules entirely. Marcus's combat manual would go on to revolutionize galactic warfare, introducing concepts of creativity, unpredictability, and lateral thinking to species that had become trapped by their own success. And in the Academy's halls, where laughter had once echoed at humanity's expense, there was now only silence, and the sound of beings learning to think like humans.